The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
You know, the last thing Dr. King said to me before he was murdered was in my home when we were sitting planning strategy for the Poor People's Campaign, which was on the horizon of the politics of the day. Martin said, you know, I've been thinking long and hard about our struggle, and I sit here deeply concerned that I suspect we're leading our nation on an integration trip that has us integrating into a burning house. When we look at the condition in which we find not only our world, but in particular our nation, we have a lot of wreckages around this country. And perhaps the most distracting and perhaps the most important wreckage to take a look at is really the wreckage of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. That is the voice of famed civil rights activist, actor, and singer Harry Belafonte, who passed away yesterday at the age of 96 years old. I think this clip, which was recorded somewhere around 2005, in which Harry Belafonte shared a stage with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and said to them and to the nation that the wreckage of the Democratic Party is a significant and monumental problem. And the reason I think that clip is so important, especially today, especially in this lead up to 2024, is because he immediately juxtaposes it with the Republican Party to show the dissonance, the difficulty of living in a two-party system in which one party is clearly after you in terms of their racism, their white supremacy, and another party that you expect to be helping you because you are helping them. The party that you're giving your vote to and expect something in return because that's how politics works, or at least that's how it should work. They have become a wreck. But what do you do when you're dealing in a scenario like we're dealing today, where on the one side you have the Democratic Party that is at best has held the line against fascism? That's at best. It's really hard to enumerate the things that they have accomplished for us in the last 3 years, as we outlined in yesterday's episode. That said, on the other side of the aisle, we are dealing with fascists, theocratic fascists. And I think this clip in particular shows the tension that exists between a party that should have your best interest in mind because they're getting your vote, and another party that, quite honestly, we can't have any type of relationship with because, well, they are going the distance with fascism. Take a listen in.
I've been a Democrat all my life. I have no treaty with the Republicans, nor do I really seek one. But the Democratic Party was not always our friend. As a matter of fact, a lot of what we had to struggle against was in the possession and the power of Democrats who came from the South. And when we showed them the tenaciousness and the conviction and the sense of great purpose that the people of this nation had into transforming our condition, all those Democrats from the South ran off and became Republicans as an act of punishment for what we were trying to achieve as a people. And that punishment continues to play itself out.
And this is a part of history that the Republican Party is trying to rewrite. This is part of the rejection of African-American history and so-called critical race theory, which is not taught on the grade school level, despite them waging war against critical race theory being taught on the grade school level. The history that they have to rewrite is the fact that the Southern Dixiecrats, the Southern Democrats, changed parties very clearly. You could look at the electoral maps between 1960, 1964, and 1968 and see the transition. You will see very clearly how the parties shifted, how the South went from being completely blue to being completely red. And we understand that the modern Republican Party is the party of the Confederate flag waving South. There's just no question about it. They are the party of white supremacy and Nazism. There's no question about it. But this is the part of history that they have to rewrite in order to try to win a couple of black votes, just enough black votes to put someone like Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. They don't care which fascist, so long as they get them a right-wing reactionary back in the White House. They will rewrite history. As they're not going to end their racism, but they will rewrite history to make it seem that the Democratic Party is the modern party of the Confederate flag waving South. We know better. Here's more from the icon, Harry Belafonte.
What eludes us is the bankruptcy of the action itself. This country reveals its moral decay every day of its existence. Our prisons, the largest prison system in the world, are filled with those who are the victims of poverty. The women who are disenfranchised, young teenage mothers, are victims of poverty. Poverty is knocking at our door all day long. It sits in the mirror for us to look in every morning. When we look at what's going on with the schools in this country, we build more prisons than we build schools. We have more young black men and women in the prisons of America than we have in the universities. Poverty is in our face all day long. Why is everybody behaving all of a sudden like this is some great revelation?
Harry Belafonte, gone at the age of 96. The independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, has already endorsed Joe Biden for president and has, of course, announced that he himself would not be running in 2024. And apparently a lot of people are shocked and surprised by this, disappointed by this. In fact, a lot of people who were vehement supporters, ardent supporters of Bernie Sanders, some who, in fact, worked for Bernie Sanders, are now coming out upset, or at least disappointed by this decision. I'm not sure why anyone would be surprised that a man, whether he's an independent or a Democrat, who caucuses with the Democrats, is not going to primary the sitting incumbent. The last time that happened, that gave us Ronald Reagan, which gave us the last 42 years of trickle-down economic policy that has literally set us on this dystopian trajectory that we're on, because Ted Kennedy decided to what's up with the Kennedys? Robert Kennedy now. Ted Kennedy decided to primary Jimmy Carter back in 1980, giving us Ronald Reagan, and why so many are shocked or think that this is some type of unique affront on democracy when this is par for the course. Donald Trump did not allow a primary challenger. The Republican Party would never allow an incumbent to be challenged in the primary, no matter how unpopular they are. Right. So to be shocked by this move really makes no sense, except for the fact that there is a lane, a consistent and persistent lane in so-called progressive politics that allows you to gain momentum so long as you, no matter what, stand as an outsider, right? There's an outsider lane. And that lane, to be quite honest, has started to become co-opted by right-wing reactionaries. And we see the intersection of the talking points and the agenda. And that gives us someone like Robert Kennedy Jr., who is now primarying Joe Biden, who is aligned with the right, literally just very straightforward, aligned with the right-wing reactionaries, a regular on conservative media, regular photo ops. This is Robert Kennedy Jr. taking regular photo ops with the likes of Roger Stone, with the likes of Steve Bannon, right? So getting his promotion, the promotion for his campaign from Tucker Carlson on Fox News. So that intersection that exists on the left of the Democratic Party that allows a wide enough open lane ideologically to bring in right-wing reactionaries, that is a consistent path forward. This is the same lane that how Glenn Greenwald, formerly of The Intercept, fell over into the arms of fascism. I mean, it's literally a career path. And so this argument, this bad faith argument saying that somehow Bernie Sanders is now has betrayed the progressive movement because he is deciding not to run again at his good old age, and the number of times that he has given it his very best shot, and the number of times that he has put it all on the line for the progressive movement. In fact, there would be no modern progressive movement as it stands today without the efforts of Bernie Sanders. Yet and still, his former press secretary, Brianna Joy, tweeted out the following: "There's a world in which an independent leftist senator would withhold his endorsement for a presidential candidate in exchange from some meaningful concessions, perhaps a Democratic Party debate. I wish we lived in that world." Followed up by Cenk, who commented on this days before, saying the DNC, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, saying the DNC has already announced that it would not allow any debates in 2024 primary. Biden is not to be challenged. Everyone on the Democratic side must shut up and fall in line. Not having debates is undemocratic and ridiculous. No progressive should agree to this kind of power grab. I'm sorry, Cenk, are you new to politics? Love you, friend, but are you new to politics? Because show me the last time the Republican Party allowed a sitting incumbent to be primaried. And then show me the last time the Democratic Party allowed it and give me the results of that election. What happened? We are literally in the world, the dystopian world that came as a result of the primary challenge of Jimmy Carter. Now, what's on the line in 2024? It's a little bit worse. The stakes are a little bit higher, right? We're dealing with theocratic fascists who are very openly and publicly and proudly planning the execution of anyone who participates in transgenderism, transition, whether they be counselors, whether they be the parents of the transgender child, whether they be the doctors. They're literally conspiring to kill people from the gay community, preachers preaching sermons about executing gay people. And we're obviously dealing with a continued onslaught against Black people. The stakes are extremely high, and yet we want to allow a debate between the likes of Robert Kennedy Jr. and Joe Biden. Marianne Williamson, I am personally a fan of, so you're not going to hear me kind of go against Marianne Williamson much on this platform. She's, I like her spirituality. I like her kind heart. I like her love of love and her love for peace. Okay, so you're not going to see me dragging her on this show because she's challenging Joe Biden. But Robert Kennedy Jr., who has taken about 13% of the support for Joe Biden, who is clearly a right-wing reactionary masquerading as a progressive. That's who the ivermectin hawking Robert Kennedy Jr., the anti-vaxxer who targeted the Black community specifically, intentionally said that he wanted to target the Black community with the anti-vaccine message for COVID-19. That's who you all want on stage to primary Joe Biden. I mean, what are we doing here, folks? Well, what we're doing is that, again, that career path that exists for leftists who would leave their ideological options wide enough to include right-wing reactionaries like Robert Kennedy Jr. It is a solidified career path, and it certainly moves you up in media. It certainly moves you up in politics. It certainly gives you the attention and the clicks that you need to make a really great living in America, because as we all know, anyone, whether they are doing it intentionally or they're useful idiots or they're just bad faith actors, anyone willing to do the bidding of right-wing conservatism, anyone willing to do, just like the other side, Black folks who are willing to do the bidding of white supremacy, those checks are really big. And those checks cash, okay? Those checks you could take to the bank. So it's a career opportunity. It is a money-making opportunity for so many people. And even for those people, I don't think it's a career opportunity for Cenk Uygur. He has his own platform, but it's still a bad faith argument. And it simply is. No matter where you fall, whatever your opinion is of Joe Biden, mine is not high. I mean, honestly, if the man were to step down, okay, you're not going to see me crying any tears about it. But to create the collision point just before 2024, just before Ron DeSantis or, God forbid, Donald Trump, either one of them, get into this position of power that they covet so much, we have those on our side, ostensibly on our side of the equation, who are encouraging a path that is going to make the way easy and plain for fascism. They always say that liberalism leads to fascism. Well, I believe this is a fine example of how so-called progressives absolutely do their part in bringing fascism to this country.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions.
And here we go. Very special welcome to our newest patron. Ladies and gentlemen, non-gender conforming friends, please welcome Juan Perez. Juan Perez, this entire patron party is for you, my friend. Oh, come up. Yeah, and here we go. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, none of the commercial interruptions, and you get access to our bi-weekly patron party, which is always off the chain, DJ exclusive, never, ever disappoints. Patreon.com/The BPD Show, and we'll be back right after this commercial break. Unless you're a patron, like Juan.
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Yeah.
Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Yep. Yeah. Welcome back. I want to make a very interesting transition, and you'll see why I'm doing it in a minute. Jake Shields is a former UFC MMA fighter and 5-time world champion. He is also a right-wing reactionary who took to Twitter overnight to say the following, quote, "Would you support the public executions of anyone who helps a child transition?" Talking about trans children. This would include doctors, therapists, teachers, guidance counselors, etc. He said, things are being pushed to such an extreme that the cure is likely going to be just as extreme. When I say that these people are honestly planning public executions of anyone that they disagree with, because it starts here with transgender people, right? This gives them the cover because there's so many people who are terrified of the idea of somebody being trans, such that they would open up their hearts to executing everyone involved with it, whether this is a transition of a child or a transition of an adult. I mean, they're really, we're at that stage. And public executions, folks, like let's be real. This is something that they kind of lust after over there on the right. I mean, they brought back the firing squads in some states. You have conservative preachers who are advocating for the execution of anyone who's gay or lesbian. Do you think they're going to stop there? Do you think that if you're not gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual, that these people who are not aligned with racism, they are the racists? They're just currently preoccupied with their transphobia and homophobia, because that's the red meat that's going to put enough blood in the water for people to sit back and allow public executions of people who make decisions about their bodies. Decisions about their bodies in consultation with their counselors, in consultation with their doctors, and whether or not you agree with it, it is a personal decision that they make, and we're dealing with a group of people who are saying, we should execute you for that decision. Do you think you're safe? Now, here comes a transition that you might not like, but I'm going to do it anyway. As opposed to, there was a time in this country when we would execute traitors publicly, where we would execute people who try to overthrow this government because, well, that's usually the penalty for treason. Now, I'm not particularly in favor of any type of execution from a state because, well, the state is guilty and has as much blood on its hands as anyone, any group of people. The governments of this world have no authority or moral standing to execute people. That said, these folks who are calling for the public execution of transgender people and the people who help them transition, the doctors and the counselors and the guidance counselors, and the parents, et cetera, et cetera. These are the same treasonous people who try to overthrow the government on January 6th. So if we're going to go for public executions, why not go for the one that's clearly outlined and totally acceptable in history for us to completely and totally eradicate the people who try to eradicate this nation? If that's your thing, if your thing is to see public executions happen, and that's what you're foaming at the mouth for, shouldn't you be careful? Because you yourself have already crossed the line. These right-wing, maybe not Jake. Jake probably wasn't at January 6th. Jake Shields, he probably wasn't at January 6th, but he's certainly a part of that faction of this country who seriously want to overthrow this government. And the last time I checked, one of the punishments for treason is death. You know, this is why you got to be careful about worried about the speck that's in someone else's eye when you got a whole ass beam in your eye. Sorry to all my church folks. I'm doing my best. But this is really where we are in this country. We are taking public surveys about who supports the public execution of someone who made a decision in their life that perhaps you don't agree with, that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you think that, oh my goodness, the morality of this country is falling apart. I'm sorry, this country was never moral. Okay, let's be certain. This country was never moral. And if you're talking about like the sexual morality, oh, come on now. If we're going to be doing some executing, why are we not going to be executing the pedophiles in all of these religious institutions who have historically gotten away with assaulting children, with molesting children? But I digress. That's not even really the part I wanted to talk about so much as the new tapes that have been dropped on Ted Cruz, who himself now seems to be a part of the January 6th conspiracy to overthrow a duly elected president. Take a listen to this segment from Ari Melber, The Beat with Ari Melber on MSNBC, as he plays this clip from Ted Cruz in his conversation with Fox News host Maria Bartiromo, giving her advice as to how they can successfully stop the certification of a duly elected president. Take a listen in.
Who's deciding who gets inaugurated?
It would be the results of that commission and what they find. And if they found credible evidence of fraud that undermines confidence in the electoral results in any given state, they would report on that.
He admits it. You heard the question there. So who decides who gets inaugurated? That's what this is all about, because you have a certified winner. You have all of the courts having passed up any potential challenge to that. So at that point, it was President-elect Biden. And Cruz answers that this fake, made-up so-called commission that he and his Trump buddies were planning to try to create to bureaucratize a coup. That's what they were trying to do. That was his answer. That's how they would steal the race.
Now, clearly, I don't really expect anyone to try or convict Ted Cruz of treason for this, right? I'm using hyperbole to make a point that people who live in glass houses, the last thing that you should ask for is for someone else to be stoned. And that analogy actually worked out a lot better than I thought. I wasn't really, that's actually pretty good. They live in glass houses and they're throwing stones to try to kill someone else, to execute some other people because of the decisions that they make that don't affect anyone else but themselves. Listen, folks who are transitioning, that's their choice. That's their decision, like it or not. That's their liberties. And we're dealing with a party that's saying that people who make that decision and anyone who assists them with it, they should be executed. And we're dealing with with a party out. Would Ted Cruz say something that ridiculous? Clearly, no, but they don't have to. They have their apparatchiks, their rank and file. The most dangerous part of this movement are the people who are across social media, their pastors who are in their churches, who are literally preaching for the execution of gay people simply because they're gay. People who are calling for that level of violence better make sure they have nothing in their ledger. And here we see that they without question, they are riddled with offenses that could also be called for execution. And I don't think this country should execute a single person because black folks end up getting the short end of that stick and we get executed only to find out years later that we have been exonerated. But this is the extreme times that we live in. This is a type of advocacy that is being made. And the absurdity of it all is, meanwhile, they're doing this in conjunction with a slow-moving coup. Forget about the idea of executing these people because they committed acts of treason and insurrection, but just consider the fact that this coup is still ongoing. How do you think this country is going to look when Ron DeSantis gets in power and you have the rank and file of the Republican Party in the trenches calling for the conservative movement, calling for the execution of people because they're gay, lesbian, and transgender? And actually, let me, before we go to the next segment, let me put a fine point on a tangent here. Because one of the number one things that I haven't take issue with is seeing black Christians, whom I run, that's my circle. That's where, if you want to know where I am outside of the show, I'm in the streets with black Christians. I got a good set that I organize with. We're taking action here locally. But to see black Christians who are standing with this anti-LGBT moment, this I want to ask you a question. Are you also okay with being in league with these people? Are you okay with the idea of executing people simply because they're gay, lesbian, and transgender? Because that's what's on the table right now. That's the world that we're going into. And to stand by and tacitly support it or to directly support it puts blood on our hands. God forbid. Coming up in the Patrons episode, we got quite a few more stories to cover, but one of the stories that I have to dig into is what's going on in Montana with the intentional silencing of their first transgender representative, Zoe Zephyr. They have Republicans, conservatives, refuse to allow a duly elected representative to speak because she's transgender. You know, I'm going to talk about that in the Patrons episode, but I just really want to double back on something, and I'm going to repeat this over and over again until everybody who needs to hear it hears it. I need to ask and I'm talking specifically to black Christians because I firmly believe that black liberation theology is the path to overthrowing this theocratic fascist movement that fancies themselves to love the Lord, right? They really think that they love Jesus, and the power that they have is in this ostensible love for God, when in actuality they have deeply seated hatred for every single group that does not follow their political ideology. And that's why there has to be representation from the Christian delegation that will stand up and fight back against these monsters who carry the same identity, Christian label that we carry. And so when I'm going to talk about Zoe in the Patrons Only episode, because we only have a couple of seconds before I'm out of time for the public show. But I really just have to ask black folks, Christian or not, but particularly Christians, are you okay with the violence and the discrimination that is being levied against the transgender community and the LGBTQIA community? I'm not asking you if you're okay if you're trans, or if you want to date a trans person. I'm not asking you if you want to share bathrooms with them. I'm not asking you if you're comfortable. I'm not asking any of those things. I'm asking, where is your moral compass? Are you going to sit by and, because you disagree spiritually with what someone is doing with their personal life, and allow them to become the targeted, to allow them to become the oppressed? Whether you sit by tangentially and just say nothing, or whether you actively participate in it, are you okay with the conversations now going to public executions because someone exists? Now, that's a rhetorical question, because I'm sure for the vast majority of us, the answer is no. But if we don't honestly examine ourselves and take a minute and pause and realize the score, then perhaps we wouldn't realize that we've been going along with this bigotry. Whether we are silently going along with it or whether we're active on social media calling out the gay stuff, right? That's one of the favorite phrases of some folks that I really get kind of tired of. Oh, I'm tired of that gay stuff. Well, I'm tired of your ignorance. I'm tired of the bigotry. I'm tired of any oppression, and Black liberation theology, Black Christianity of all, suggests that wherever we find oppression, we attack the oppressors. We don't side with the oppressors because we don't like no gay stuff. But anyway, patreon.com/the BPD show. We'll get more into this conversation. If not, folks, love you, mean it. We'll see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.